When you're creating artwork in Illustrator, you could spend hours trying to visually align objects to one another to get the look that you desire. Fortunately, Illustrator provides a way to align and distribute objects with the click of a button. Let's take a look at how these features work inside of Illustrator. I'm beginning this video with the clover_align file already open on my computer. And there are several ways that we can access the Align panel. And one of the ways we can do that is with multiple objects selected. You'll notice that up here in your control panel, you now have an Align link. And if you click on that, that's going to display your Align panel. So that's a quick access when you need to align objects on your artboard. Now I'm going to click off of that, and to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to go to the Window menu and choose Align to actually open my Align panel so that it's a free-floating panel, so I don't have to go up here each time. So you'll notice up here that I have several objects selected, and that's the first criteria when using the Align panel. If I only have one object selected, there's not a whole lot I can do here. So with multiple objects selected, you can determine how you want these objects to align. Now, I should point out that if you look down here in the Align To section, if I click on this button, you'll notice that the default behavior is to align to selection. And that essentially means to align the objects to one another. Now, with all of these objects selected, we can come up here to the Align section at the very top, and you'll notice we have several options. We can align all of them to the left of the object. So if I do that, you can see that all of the left edges align to one another. And I'm just going to undo that so we can do this again. We can do that to the center and to the right as well. Now, further over here, we have the vertical align. And this is going to be more useful in our case because what we can do is we can vertically align the top edges. You'll notice that all of the top edges align to one another. You can also align their centers, and you can align their bottoms. Now, in this particular case, the end result is the same for every one of these options. But depending on what objects you have selected, you will get varying results. And a good example would be if you had objects of varying shapes. So what I'm going to do in this case is I am going to vertically align the tops so that the top edges all align to one another. Now, what you can also do here is in the Align To section, we could choose Align to Artboard. And now if I choose the same option, Vertical Align Top, not only is it going to align the top edges, but it's going to align everything to the top of the artboard. And that's really what we want. So if we come down here and select these objects that are on the left side of our artboard, we could do something very similar. We could click on the horizontal align left, and that'll align the left edges. And it's aligning to the artboard. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that to the right side. We'll go ahead and align the right edges to the artboard. And last but not least, we can also align the bottom edges. So we'll click on this button here. And now we have everything aligned to the artboard the way we want it to be. Now, you do have more control, however. So you can see that in the middle of my artboard, I'm just going to marquee all three of these clovers. You'll notice that we can do the same thing with these objects. So for example, if I choose Vertical Align Top, you'll notice that it's still aligning to my artboard. Now I'm going to undo that. Let's change this to Align to Selection. And let's hit that button again, Vertical Align Top. And you'll notice that what it does in this case is it aligns to the topmost object. I'm going to undo that. You'll see that this object stays where it is and everything aligns to it. And that's really how all of these align options work. However, you do have control over this. So as an example, you'll notice that with all these objects selected, we can come over here and let's say I want this left object to stay where it is and I want everything else to align to it. What I can do is I can click once more and you'll notice that I get more of a bold highlighting around this, and this specifies this object as a key object. And what will happen is now everything is going to align to that key object. So if I choose the vertical align top option once again, you'll notice that now everything aligns to it. So you have a lot of control here as far as how you want these objects to align to one another. If I undo this, I could click on the center clover to make that the key object. And if I choose Align Top, now everything aligns to it. So you need to remember this key object that really becomes very powerful when you're aligning objects on your artboard. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect that. And now for these objects on the sides of my artboard, I would like them spaced out a little bit better because they're all clumped together and really in just a random order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the topmost object here, and I'm going to drag it up, and I'll go ahead and hold down the Shift key to constrain the movement perfectly vertical. And I'll just position the top object where I want it to appear, and then I'll select the bottom object, and I'll do the same thing down here at the bottom. And essentially what I'm doing is establishing the topmost object and the bottommost object on this strip of shapes. Now what I'll do is select all of these by marqueing them, and then we can use the Distribute Objects category. So you'll notice we have several options here. This left side is the vertical distribute options, and the right side is the horizontal distribute options. Now when you have objects that are the same shape, you may not see much of a difference between these three objects. But when you have different sized shapes and different shaped objects, you will notice a difference when using these options. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the vertical distribute center. And what that'll do is it'll distribute the center of the objects from this point to this point and then distribute them all in between. So as you can see, it's a really easy way for me to distribute these objects accordingly. So what I can do is I can do the same thing down here at the bottom. I'll just kind of move this over and align this to the leftmost and align the rightmost object. Once again, I'm just going to marquee these objects, and this time we're going to come over here to the right side and we'll choose horizontally distribute center. And there we go. Now when you're doing symmetrical objects like this, you may or may not want to distribute them manually, but what I'll do just for example's sake is we'll go ahead and move this object over and move this over here. And then when I marquee these, we can go ahead and distribute their centers. And then we'll do that one more time to the right side here. And we'll marquee those objects. And we'll go ahead and distribute their vertical centers. And now you can see that we have a very symmetrical design here. Now, one thing I want to point out too is down here at the bottom you have the distribute spacing option. And if I were to marquee a range of these objects, you'll notice that you can distribute the vertical and horizontal space as well. Now you'll notice right now if I choose distribute vertical space, nothing's really going to happen. And that's because my objects are all the same size and they're symmetrical. So distributing the object and distributing the spacing are essentially the same thing. And where this tool or these tools become helpful is when you have objects that are varying sizes or varying shapes, you can distribute the space instead of the object. And in addition, you can also control the spacing between the objects. So if I highlight these objects, what I need to do is determine a key object so that I can distribute the spacing. So for example, if I use the topmost object, you can see this is now bold, and now the value field becomes available. So with a key object highlighted, I can now, you'll notice that the field here is now visible that allows me to type in a value. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type in here 0.125. And that alone doesn't really do anything. What you need to do after you enter that value is you need to click on the vertical distribute space button. And when I do that, you'll notice that now it puts 1/8 of an inch in between each and every object. You can experiment here. Maybe we want 1/4 of an inch. We'll just click on the distribute spacing. and you can continue adjusting accordingly. So for this example, I really don't want a specific amount of space. Instead of distributing the space, I'll just distribute their centers. So if I click on this button, it'll automatically calculate the space instead of specifying an exact value. As you can see, once you know how the align and distribute features work, they're really quite powerful. I encourage you to practice using these tools when creating your own artwork. The more you use it, the more proficient you'll become at using the align and distribute tools.